Welcome to What Builders Don't Tell Their Clients with your host, Joel Miner. Listening to the show, you'll learn how to avoid the unnecessary pain and avoidable costs that commonly occur in the building and renovating process. Joel will also inspire you with his knowledge, experience, and ideas on how to make your home a place to suit your lifestyle for years to come.
Hello and welcome to another week's episode of What Builders Don't Tell Their Clients. So this week I'm speaking with Andrew Quadrio from Quadrio Building Services, and he specialises in the renovation extensions. So for those of you who don't know Andrew, I'm just going to get him to tell him a bit about himself and how he sort of got into the industry.
Yeah, my name is, as Joel said, Andrew Quadrio. I run a company called Quadrio Building Services down here in Sydney, and we specialise in renovations and additions to existing homes, and we help our clients realise their dream of when they've outgrown their home, they don't sort of love their home anymore. We help them fall back in love with their home by renovating and renewing their spaces to suit the next chapter in their lives.
Yeah, cool. So how did you first get into the industry, seeing as we're going to have a second run at this because I didn't hit the record button to start off with?
I got in the industry about 15 years ago. My dad was a builder, my grandfather was a builder, and building has a very long line in our family dating way back to Italy and hundreds of years ago. So building is sort of in the blood from a very long time ago. It was sort of, the dad was a carpenter. I became a carpenter. I left school and didn't really want to do anything else but be a builder. So that's what I did. And we started our company, wife and I started our company about 6 years ago, just about 6 years ago.
Yeah, cool. So what I wanted to bring up was just to do with some of the common problems that occur within the building industry, and a lot around the fact of variations. Now, I guess if a lot of people, friends or family, have been at barbecues or whatever, and they've had a previous experience with a builder or with the building industry, I guess some of the most common conversations come round the experience on how they operate, how their experience was throughout a renovation or new build. And I think a lot of the times, I've been at a few from a personal experience, that people talk about all the extra costs and additional variations that they didn't know about before starting, and what margins were getting put on stuff because they weren't clear exactly on the contract they were signing. So what I'm asking is, what sort of effects can that have on homeowners with variations and extra costs from your sort of experience when it comes to variations and stuff?
As you said, it has a very a heavily detrimental effect on their experience, which is really what builders are. What the builder's product is. It's not necessarily the build itself, so the build quality of the product at the end, the actual house. That's not necessarily all of it, but the client experience is what is more important, because people remember that long after they forget about the tiles they chose and taps and any little paint marks and that sort of stuff. Variations have, as I said, a massive effect on people's experiences. And if your builder hasn't done enough homework on your project beforehand, or in the preliminary stages of pre-construction, then variations can rear up very, very quickly and become very, very costly. Some of them are unavoidable. Like if we find something, I tell people all the time, the system that we use eliminates 95% of variations, because we do, as I said, we do all this sort of preliminary work and investigation and selections and all that sort of stuff with the client before we start building, so that once we get to there, everybody knows what they're going to get, and there's no ifs, buts, or maybes, unless they change something at the time, which is fine also. The things that we have had in the recent times that have sort of kicked up a stink with in terms of variations are, like if we find asbestos buried underneath a slab. We did that on a job late last year where we found some, it was buried under the grass in the front yard. It was only like 50 mil below the surface of the grass. I had no idea it was there. House had been there 50 years. Nothing had been done on this joint for about 50 years. And we stripped the grass off the front yard, and there it was sitting underneath the grass. So they're the things that we sort of say to people, like, that sort of thing where we can't see it, you can't see it, then, that's the only thing we sort of tell them, that we sort of the only variations that we come across. But yes, they have a massive effect on people's experiences throughout the building process. And everybody hates, as you can sort of imagine, anybody out there could sort of imagine if your builder comes to you a week in and says, "Oh, by the way, we didn't allow for this drop edge beam on the slab, or we didn't realise it was that big because we didn't look at the drawing properly. We need an extra 20 grand for the drop edge beam, and we need that money before we can proceed any further." Like, that's going to upset you to no end, and two, you haven't got much choice but to pay it. If you want your building built, you've got to pay it.
Yep.
As unfair as it seems, and unreasonable as it seems, that's the harsh reality of it.
Yeah, and I guess it comes down to detail too, and making sure they can trust the builder. But just going to go back to what you're talking about with basically, you can 95%, like you said, 95% of most variations are avoidable. But like what you just said with the slab, and there was asbestos underneath from being there for years. For those of you who don't know, that's classed as an unforeseen circumstance. That's normally a clause that's put in a contract somewhere. So generally, there's a little clause about this saying that basically what Andrew's just described with some of the things that we may not be able to see what's behind the wall or underneath the slab, and builders can potentially allow for some certain things, but at the same time, like asbestos underneath the slab, no one knows that's there, and you don't want your builder factoring in extra things like that and costs, even if it's not there, because why do you need to pay it if it's not relevant?
Exactly.
So I think why does this happen? Like, what's the sort of cause of it?
I think before we've a very sort of stringent system that we go through in terms of this preliminary building stage, so pre-construction, if you will. And before we use that, we've had a lot of variations because there wasn't a lot of detail and that sort of stuff. Because we didn't spend, and 95% of builders or 99% of builders don't spend enough time in the prelim stage. They just want to push out a quote because they're not getting paid for it, which I think is a dumb idea. Because they're not getting paid for it, they just want to get it out and done, and then they're sort of banking on 1 in 5, 1 in 6 quotes that they might get, sort of thing. So they just want to get them out as quickly as possible so that they can try and win one. So they get 6 out, they're like, "Oh, I'll get one, that's good," and then I'll worry about the varies when the time comes. And there's not enough. They sit there and they go, "Oh, there's not really enough detail, but I'll just allow this much, and then I'll just put a clause in the contract if we get the job," or something like that. And that's how you also get massive differences in pay, in cost between builders if you happen to get a couple of quotes, which is also a silly idea.
And I guess like there you said with the 3, like a lot of people tend to get 3 quotes, and then they all get these 3 quotes, and then all of a sudden they go, well, what's the difference between A, B and C? Because I guess all materials cost the same and all quality labour costs the same. So is there something missing, or is there inferior materials, or someone forgotten something? And I guess it just leads to a whole heap of unknown questions. And from someone wanting to renovate or extend, they're just sitting there going, what's the difference? And they've got a heap of questions running through their head, and they're sort of thinking, well, what do I do now? Because I don't understand half of this stuff, and what's the difference between the 3 of them? And,
that's right.
I guess this is, like you said, if someone was, like you said, with the preliminary start and going through, you have a bit of a system you set up, what would you suggest to someone if they were going through that process to try and avoid some of these things that happen quite commonly in the building industry?
The big things for us, the big things for people to look out for is make sure that your builder doesn't just send, especially if you're going through a major renovation, if it's a bathroom or something, or a little deck off the back of the house, something small, it's not as important because your scope is not so wide, so there's not that bigger risk for a variation. But if you're doing a large renovation, so you're putting 2 bedrooms and a bathroom on the back of the house and a family room, so you're going to spend a couple of $100,000 at least, sort of thing, then your builder shouldn't be just sending you the quote via email. If they do that, then to me that tells me that they don't particularly care about it. Your builder should be coming out and taking you through the quote, taking through every line item on the quote. It doesn't necessarily have to be broken down, but it has to show all of the inclusions. Like when we do it, when we present a proposal to a client, I personally come out. Don't show them before. Don't send it to them beforehand. I personally come out, put it on the table in front of them, and say, "Here's your copy. Let's go through it." And then we go down the list one by one and make sure that everything that we've talked about prior, and that everything that's on the plans, we have the plans there as well, is included in the quote. So then they know. Then you, as the client, will know exactly what you're getting, exactly why it's costing so much, because they've included this for taps and this for toilets and this much for carpet and this much for painting. If you're doing a renovation, internal renovation, painting is sometimes a bit difficult to ascertain a price when you might not paint that wall, but once we start painting this wall, you go, okay, no, we're going to paint the rest of this room or that room in there because it looks a bit daggy now that we've got new paint in this section. So they need to make sure, or you as the client needs to make sure that they run through everything with you. If they don't, get them out to run through it with you, or ring them on the phone, say, what's this, what's this, what's this, what's this? Have you allowed for this? Anything you don't see on there that you thought that you said, ask them. So you really need to make a list of things that are and aren't on the quote that you really want to ask them about. And you don't need to know. They don't necessarily need to know the technical side of it. Just ask them, where's this? Have you allowed for this? Have you allowed for that? All those sort of things. And especially when it comes to prime cost items, so stuff like taps and tiles and floor coverings and kitchen bench tops or something. If they haven't asked you to select those, then they've allowed a figure for those. So if they've allowed $1,000 for tiles and you've got 2 bathrooms, then then you're going to be short on tiles, and there's a variation.
And I guess it's important to know that because I don't think a lot of people get taken through the contract stage. A lot of builders run through a contract. They might just send it to them and say, basically, here, sign this. But when it comes to, like what Andrew just said, for those who don't know what a prime cost item is, it's just basically an item that hasn't been selected. It's, for example, like you said, taps or a door handle, and it's just an item. There's no labour. It's just an item by itself. Now, when it comes to tiles, like Andrew said there, if they've allowed X amount of dollars for a tile, you want to make sure that when the builder is setting prime cost items, there's actually the allowance is actually enough to get your job done or get something for your money. Because in the contract there is something, from memory I know the one I use, and it does say it's got to be a justifiable amount allowed for, for example, a vanity. And they've, may have allowed $100 for a vanity, but, bottom of the range vanity might come $500. So I think that's a very important thing to be careful of, to make sure that if you do get a quote from a builder or whoever, that if your PC items are listed, they are listed, and is actually a dollar figure beside each one, so you know that before you get into that contract that you can sort of what it's going to cost. But like I said, with that, you don't want to make sure that it's justifiable and there's going to be enough money to actually get something to start off with if you do end up signing a contract with that. So I guess, like, what can the homeowners do throughout, like, a build or renovation to sort of help their builder in a way to, like with prime cost items and whatnot, to sort of bring to the table up front to help them select the items and get them all included to start off with?
The best thing to do is to know your budget, so that when you go to select them, you don't go and pick $500 taps when you've only got $150 per tap to choose. Like if we're using the tap example, for example.
Yep.
So know your budget, and there are companies out there that supply tapware and that sort of stuff. If we just use that as the example, there are companies out there that you can send them your budget, send them what you've got to select for your bathroom, for example, and they will tailor a package to that budget, or they'll give you a couple of options that'll suit that budget. That's a really good tool that I've literally only just found out about. Another thing you can do is make sure you communicate with your builder as to when they need to be selected. Usually, I know what we do is we we try and do all the selections very, very early in the project. It doesn't matter how far off they're going to be used or needed on site. We get them to do them very, very early, so that when the time comes, I'm not ringing I'm not ringing the client saying, hey, I need this by tomorrow. Have you gone and selected it yet? So that's another sort of critical thing, is that make sure that communication between you. I know you've spoken on previous podcasts about communication. But make sure the communication between you and the builder is very clear as to when things need to be selected and by what date, so that he can make sure they're on site on time. So there's no delay there.
Is that something you give your clients, like a checklist or something that they can sort of, say you basically need to select a toilet, this, that, blah, blah. Is that something you do as well?
Yeah. So what we do is we have a form. We call it our prime cost item selection list. And what it is, it has every room in the project, whether it's a house or renovation or whatever, and it has every item that needs to be selected for each room. So it's paint colours or carpet or for a bedroom sort of thing, or door handles for a bedroom, and right to, going to bathroom, taps, toilet, shower head, cistern, shower screen, bath, all that sort of stuff. And we have for each sort of category of selection, so for taps or for tiles, we have the budget, and it's on the form when you get it from us. It's on the form, so if you've got $5,000 to spend on your PC items for the bathroom, it's written at the top. You've got $5,000. Your budget is $5,000. And what we do is we fill it out so that how many of each thing needs to be selected, how many of each item needs to be in each room.
Yep.
And then you go and make this. Therefore, you need 3 sets of taps and 1 toilet and 1 bath and that sort of stuff. And then we get you to take the form to the supplier. The supplier that we send you to knows us, knows the form, and then they will that you select what you're after. They will populate the form for you, so they'll write down the model number, the brand name, and the model. Right. Then we get it back from them. We make sure it's all going to work, so the vanity is the right size and it's the right height and it goes in this direction. And ask any other little details that have got to go with that sort of stuff. If that's all good, we then both us and the client sit down. We sign off we go through the selection list again, sign it off at the bottom, and that way everybody knows what they're getting, how much it's going to cost, whether it's over budget or under budget, and then from there there's no back and forth as to whether we wanted that or not that. But here we've got it all here on a piece of paper, black and white. Here it is, what the client is getting and what me, the builder, is supplying.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea with how you do that, because I think a lot of people find it's quite overwhelming when they go into select tapware or fixtures and fittings, because all of a sudden they're like, oh, I've got so much to pick. And I think the biggest problem that comes down to it starts getting really dreamy and really like, oh, we can do so much with what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And I think having that budget up the top of, your prime cost items or an allowance, I think it sort of like brings reality back to it a little bit, just to sort of try and stick within people's budgets, because like I said, people don't realise sometimes, just this little bit extra here and a little bit extra there and a little bit extra here, and all of a sudden their job's gone over budget. So and it's, that's something I think is really important also, is making sure your builder can give you the best value for money, and also getting what you want and being able to stick to the budget, a realistic budget that you have. So I think that's another important one as well. But yeah, I like that idea with the pre-C item list and the budget with that. So
yeah, we found it works quite well. The other thing we do from time to time is my wife Katie, who works for us as well. She will go with the client to the supplier and go with them with the form and so she can guide them around, because as you said, a lot of people can find it really overwhelming. You go into a tap shop and there's thousands of different taps, and you go, oh, my head's going to explode because I don't know which tap I really like. I like that one, 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 and oh, that one's really nice, and that's a copper one. Oh, I like this one because it's brushed brass, and and then all of a sudden, you as always, the human nature, you like the most expensive one.
Yep.
And having someone there saying, well, we've only really got $200 per tap, and that's a $500 tap. Do you really want to look at this one is very similar. This one over here is very similar, and it's $220 a tap. Do you want to sort of look at that? Why don't we look at this one to start with? So that's the sort of guidance we give our clients when they go to the supplier from time to time as well. So
yeah, that's awesome.
The other thing worth noting is if your builder does have a prime cost item for tapware and that sort of stuff, and he's got a budget, make sure it's clear. I know in our contracts it's written after, it's like on the same line after the actual amount that we allow for. So that's $5,000 is the margin they will charge you if you go over that budget.
Yes, that's a very good
Because
one.
if you've got if they give you $5,000 to spend on your bathroom fixtures and fittings, that's fine. But if you spend $6,000, like I tell my people, like with us, if you spend $6,000, you just pay us the extra $1,000 over. But you pay us the extra over. If you spend $4,000, and then just pay, you get a negative variation, if you will. So it'll come off your next invoice. So some builders will charge a margin on that. I don't, because I don't see that if you spend, if I give you $200 to spend on a tap, you spend $250. It doesn't take me any more time to buy it or install it just because it costs $250. So why should I be putting a margin on it? Lots of builders do, and when there's supply and labour cost, that's different. But when it's just a supply only cost, so carpet, it doesn't matter whether you buy, or tiles, for example, if you buy $40 a square metre tiles or $8 a square metre tiles, they're usually the same to lay.
Yeah, and
so
I think
there's not
Andrew's trying to say to be careful of there is there's like a lot of margins that get put on variations as well. So, like you were just saying there, find out what percentage margin gets put on. Sometimes it's 10%, sometimes it's 20%. It could even be more. And I know I was speaking to a couple at a barbecue the other day, and they were talking about this particular subject, and they were saying that they had the variation margin get put on, which they were cool with, but they didn't realise there was a little fee for the administration fee of $1,000, which cost them extra on top of the $4,000 that they already spent. So, just little things like that, trying to find out and make sure that, I think that's another important one too, is making sure the builder actually sits down with the contract and actually explains that in black and white and says, look, this is what happens if you change your mind. This is how much it's going to cost. Here's the administration fee. Here's the margin. So, I think it turns, I think from personal experience or people I've been talking to, that it just turns that whole particular project that they're doing, they just sort of get to a stage where they hate it. And they just sort of want to get out, and they've just had enough of doing what they're doing. And I guess it's sort of like how does that when that happens, how does that sort of end up at the end of a contract or getting to the end of things when it starts getting nitty gritty?
It's one of those things that at the time doesn't seem so big or so massive or such an issue, but if it adds up with other little things, with other communication breakdowns, and go back to communication again, but going with other little communication breakdowns along the way that cost either time or a little bit of money, or that so on sort of thing, they add up over time, and all of a sudden the molehill becomes a mountain, and then things explode and erupt, and people don't want to see anybody. They don't want to see the builder again, and the builder doesn't want to see them again, and then they don't want to get finished, and the builder doesn't want to come and finish it, and then it just all turns into muck, sort of thing. And that is not the situation that you ever want to be in, sort of thing, because that's terrible. You can imagine trying to go through that with a family member. It's just as bad, if not worse, with a builder, because you don't actually know them, so you get less compassion for them. So, it goes it can go pear-shaped very, very quickly.
So do you think that when people say, for example, they wanted to make a variation because they wanted to change their mind on something, which is totally cool, do you think it's important for them to get the variation like a cost breakdown, or at least a cost straight away, rather than say go ahead and do it?
I think it's very important that you understand how much it's going to cost, or at least the builder gives you some sort of, even if it's a rough figure to start with, give him an hour, say, look, we want to do this. Can you give us a figure before we go ahead with it? Sort of a rough figure, at least a rough figure before you go ahead with it, so that we know, we're up for another $5,000 or something like that. If it comes in at 5.5 or 4.5 or 6 or something like that, then okay, that's fine. But it's very important to get it costed up beforehand. But I mean, a good design and good preliminary, like pre-building works, will eliminate any need for you to change. If it's done properly to begin with, you won't need to change anything. So if the builder understands what you're after, and you feel as the client, you feel that your builder understands what you're after and the situation you're in and what you're trying to achieve with the project, whether it be a bathroom or a big extension or a room on top or whatever it happens to be, if you feel that they understand that, they will be able to deliver on that outcome much, much better than not knowing, than if they didn't know. Because it's got to be, it's in your head as the client. You have this vision of how you want to sit on the deck or sit in the back room or however, whatever you want to do. You need to convey that to the builder, and then you need to feel that the builder understands exactly what you're on about, that they can see your vision for it. That's really, really important. That's one of the first things that we do with our face-to-face meetings is I say to them, look, you really need, we need to have this very open book conversation about what you're after, because I need to understand what it is so I can deliver on it. If I can't understand what it is, I can't deliver on it. We're going to end up in a quagmire.
Yeah, definitely. I guess that comes back to, like you said, communication. Again, really, there's so much misunderstanding that gets done, because I think a lot of builders, like, they see it every day, they know how it operates and what things happen, but as someone, as a homeowner, is trying to get that out of their head and get that into a builder's head, I think is really important too, because you know, they don't want to, you don't, like you said, you don't want to end up with variations and extra costs that it could lead to potentially, you know, just this experience through your building a renovation process, just absolute disaster.
Yeah,
so,
and it should be an enjoyable process. Like, you're improving your life. Yes, you're spending a lot of money, but you're improving your life, and you especially with given the current world situation, improving your life at home would probably be quite high on people's lists at this point in time, because you're stuck at home for the majority of time. Being able to convey that to the builder, or having a builder that will bring it out of you is also very good. It's one thing you should be looking for as a client, and as you're sort of looking for a builder, is that they can get out of you what you're after.
And I guess that's something you see it, but it's probably more or less something you feel when you're with a builder, rather than that sort of, if you start getting that, I don't know, sort of feeling. I think,
definitely trust your gut on it. You've got to trust your reptilian brain, and that you've got that this person that's sitting across from you, which you haven't, which you've known for all of half an hour, that they, if you get the right feeling from them, then you're probably going to have a pretty good experience, and you're probably going to have, you could probably make it work. But if you get the sort of, I'm not quite sure, then do a bit more research. You need to do a bit more chatting and a bit more research into that person, or alternatively find someone else.
Yeah,
because the fit between the builder and the client is extremely important.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you see a lot of them. Like I tell people all the time, I say, we're going to spend a lot of time together. I'm going to be working in your house. I'm going to be there every single morning at 7 a.m. and I'm not leaving until 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You're going to be out talking to me every single day. So we've got to get along. Definitely. And if we don't get along, then it's going to turn real bad real quick. You're not going to like me walking down the driveway every morning.
I guess that's something that should be established prior to even commencing work with the builder.
Oh yeah. It should have that sort of. That's something it should be on your list of attributes for your builders, that you like them. Basically, you need to like them. If you don't like them as a person, you don't like them coming into your house every day and seeing them every day, then it's just going to turn bad for all of you.
Yeah, definitely. So, all right, that's enough for this week's show. Speaking with Andrew Quadrio from Quadrio Building Services. So, Andrew, if people are looking to know more about you and what you do and where you're from, basically, where would they be best placed to find you?
You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Quadrio Building Services with a Q, or you can visit our website at www.quadriobuildingservices.com.au.
All right, appreciate your time, Andrew.
No worries at all, mate.
That's it for this week's episode of What Builders Don't Tell Their Clients, brought to you by Refined Space Constructions. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode. Thank you for listening.